What avenue of invasion do we get into the um, Seinfrage or being question of Heidegger through the juxtaposition of the Sprachspiel of Wittgenstein with the provocation of Nietzsche that the intelligible or the thinkable as something superimposed over being as such is itself this so-called will to power. So this presentation takes for granted that there's by juxtaposing two different views through the congruency or lack of congruency, we can stretch out the meaning and see something new. The two views being the Nietzsche view and the Wittgenstein view, which aren't obviously analogous. Although it strikes me that not everyone would come to Aristotle's judgment that the gills of fish and the feathers of birds are analogous, because they serve kind of different functions in some ways. And if one would remove all the feathers of the bird, you'd still have this featherless biped. But if one would remove the gills of the fish would be dead. Or scales, sorry. Revise that. The scales of a fish are supposed to be analogous to the feathers, but I don't think you can remove the scales of the fish in the way you can the feathers of the bird. But nonetheless, Aristotle has put those two thoughts together, and it's sort of presents phenomenologically an object to us. Then the question of it would be, how does that stand in terms of historia or in terms of biological investigation? And then we see why Aristotle starts his book on the soul with this juxtaposition of historia and what he calls the dialogic attempt to state principles or definitions as against the thing, and then says who's the true physicist is the one that considers both, or the true student of nature is the one who considers both. In Nietzsche, we have then the saying that what philosophy has been without realizing it is this sort of juxtaposition. And so Heine has said that the classical spirit, so Heine is speaking in the wake of the historical consciousness of Hegel, that each one is trapped in their own time in a certain extent, is responding in a similar, sort of like at the same time that Nietzsche is, but in a different way. Says we have this juxtaposition between the Triebnach und Endlichkeit, or the drive, this Goethean type of drive, or this drive that's anyway well represented by the Goethean notion of the economics of infinity and so on. Somebody's written a book, I think Binswang or somebody has written a book on Goethe magic and economy or something like that, which is quite good. But there is somehow a real connection between liberalism or modernity understood as capitalism and this Goethean and romantic infinity. Possibly because of, this is kind of it's a lowbrow thing in a certain sense. Not to be too arrogant, but somebody has come out with a lecture series saying that everything is to be explained in some way by a placebo. Everything is placebo, you see. So, like, the simple example is somebody says this bottle of wine um, has been aged to perfection, and he sort of looks a little bit like maybe that. Remember that guy on the MASH show who's supposed to be wealthy and is always saying things like "fort," like his pronounce the word that undereducated people pronounce "forte," "fort," and he always gave the effect of coming from some old money or something. I think his Charles was his name, sort of a semi-stuffy guy in the MASH show, and the sharing the tent with Alda and the other guy. Say it's somebody that looks like that and who really looks like they know what they're talking about wine. Then this is like a placebo effect, which actually makes it taste better. People literally experience it as tasting better, and it could be shown in the neurons that they experience more pleasure of whatever kind from this placebo. So everything is placebo, has a certain vague sense to it. And if you would start from this point of view, you can kind of see where Aristotle poses that it's very obtuse because it's hard to put our fingers on it, why there must be this juxtaposition between principles or concepts and the actual real world we're talking about, because they overlap in some way that's mysterious and not simple. But the same mystery would be captured by, I think, what Nietzsche is saying is that cognition or intelligibility, both of which are actually very vague words, are the same, and that this is what the philosophers are seeking, but they only seek it because they know somewhere deep inside that they have a dread that couldn't be proved, because they know that the world really isn't thinkable or intelligible properly. But they have this will to do it, which is somehow a sick will. And Nietzsche wants to break us of that illness, as he sees it. Now let's set this across from the Sprachspiel version. So according to Wittgenstein, who comes way later, wait, let me do the thing about, I think I kind of skipped over the thing about Heinrich Heine. So Heinrich Heine has spoken both of the Trieb nach Unendlichkeit, this drive to infinity, as the romantic spirit drive, so-called. Josiah Royce in America is called this desire to, he says that the romantics think he best knows the truth, who has experienced the most moods, to put another juxtaposition of definitions of romanticism in there. But against this romantic spirit, Heinrich Heine, who's kind of operating at the same time with Nietzsche with the same datum, as it were, from Hegel, opposes the classical spirit, which is the Trieb nach Vollendisch, or the drive to completion. So there's this jump. There's this problem of completion is sort of the Greek version, whereas then there's another version, perfection, and it's sort of like the Russian saying about the good is the enemy of the good enough, or something along those lines, like in there, but it's not totally clear. But what the classical spirit seems to cover, both Christian theologians is seeking perfection, God is infinite perfection, and his revealed laws, the prophecies revealing his laws, which would, I suppose, I think Thomas would include, Isaac Newton in the mythical version, getting this notion of gravity from the apple falling or whatever. But anyway, but Isaac Newton discovering certain regularities in gravity has completely disclosing or making intelligible or thinking the laws of gravity, which were always there waiting to be repeatedly disclosed, is like prophecy is thought in the same way. So this is a prophecy. The prophet isn't somebody predicting the future, but somebody saying the thing that's eternally true. So here we have the classical spirit seeking either fullness or perfection as juxtaposed against the romantic spirit drive, so-called trieb, drive, instinct. The word itself is very mysterious, but we know how it's used in many circumstances, especially biology, trieb, but also in Freudian thought, death drive, for instance. The classical spirit is set off against this infinite, unendlich spirit, and this is another way of showing the difficulty Nietzsche has in his thinking, which comes at the same time. If we look at this one way of thinking about will to power, and we set it aside with Wittgenstein, maybe we can get something. So let's do the Wittgenstein part of it. Is Wittgenstein says, so far as we're saying something is intelligible or we're thinking it, there's a set, it's as though, and there actually are really, but none of them is probably perfectly definitive, as though there were a set of, a list of things that are reasonable to say on these topics. And then we live in the memory about these topics. We're Sukarion, our memory people. And it's as though there were a list that said, this person has said the thing that doesn't make sense about this topic, and this is to be excised from the public discussion. But it happens immediately because people simply don't understand what's said, or they, not understanding it, they regard it as nonsense. And in other words, it's not one of the 12, or in practice in a dictionary, you'll probably, in most words, only have maybe 5 or so definitions that are reasonable to give on a subject, but it's a living or creative thing might be said, or which amounts to the same thing as the idiotic thing being said. Something that is singular and not on that list of reasonable things to say on the topic of intelligibility or thinking or cognition or whatever it may be. And in this way, Wittgenstein stretches out a phenomenological observation about how this is actually happening, with the fact that the phenomenology must also observe that the discussion, which would seem more abstract, is also actually happening, and is also actually has this list of sort of rules about how it can operate and how it can't operate. And you get, for instance, today you get quite a few people coming forward saying, but there can't be any rules about this, it's not objective, blah, blah, blah. So that would be another set of rules added on with a certain amount of phenomenological content and a certain amount of content which seems to have a formal, simple standing to it, which itself would then seem to require an example or an answer to the question, what does it look like? The Wittgenstein version, set against the Nietzschean version, shows it seems to be a chaos, a total confusion. So like if you're playing chess and somebody puts chaos in your mind, then you usually lose. So unless you're Kasparov apparently believed that he could gain an intuition into the chaos of the chessboard in a special way. But usually if people confuse you or insult you when you're playing chess, you could just drop a piece and lose immediately. This point of total confusion here between these two views, which seems to be catastrophic to the West. Heidegger scoops up. He tries to maintain it. He tries to keep and guard over it through the Seinfrage. Taken historically, we have like one Hegel, the beginning of relativism, because Hegel says knowledge is relative to the age we live in, and then Nietzsche tries to do but I'm not a son of the age, but a stepchild of the age. So, and then Heine is saying something different. Others are coming to something different from this situation, which they're peering deeply into, like this, Der Abgrund of Nietzsche, because it's a living culture, just like the simplest example, in fact, is the American. If you're kind of familiar with how America works, not everybody in America knows, or I'd say the greater proportion of people in America haven't given a lot of thought to how the American Constitution works in a way that it doesn't work in any other country on the earth, as a sort of abyss, as an abyssum that the American political parties glance into as part of their culture, and it looks back into them. It's a living thing, but when I say that, I don't mean to take the side of the Ginsburg or the people that are said to be living constitutionalists, because that means they're being accused of just writing it as they go. But it's nonetheless, it's a living thing, also for Scalia and also for those who think the Constitution has directed us already towards what is properly, towards the prophecy of what is properly intelligible concerning morals and concerning how the way of life. But nonetheless, it's alive in a certain way, because it talks back to us. It doesn't just sit there like a diamond or sit there like a jewel in a jewel case, but it's that only needs to be guarded over. No, it's peers into us, and that's how we guide ourselves in these contests. So I mean, it seems to me in some sense this is also a good way to depict how Heidegger deals with what he calls the first beginning, and why he says we have to have a faith in history, and why he still looks at the beginning of the political philosophy in Plato and the first thinkers, and what he calls the first beginning in the Anaximander and the other first Greeks.